Greetings, 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 and welcome to Island Space. I'm Andrea McDowell JohnBaptiste, your host for this evening. Thank you for joining us right here at the nation's first Caribbean museum, Island Space, a place where Caribbean cultures unite. It is my honor to host this, to close out actually Women's History Month of 2021 right here with an amazing panel of thought leaders, activists, community developers, mothers, parents, entrepreneurs, attorneys, educators. And we will be talking tonight about there's a woman in the White House. Now what? A West Indian woman in the White House. Now what? From Eugenia Charles to Kamala Harris. The impact of Caribbean women in government, and it is huge. It is my honor to introduce to you tonight our panel of esteemed guests. First, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Keisha Gray. She is a native of Kingston, Jamaica, has lived in South Florida for many years, and she has also co-authored the seminal 2018 Status of Girls and Young Women in Broward report, very important to our community right here. She currently serves as the president of the Jamaican Women of Florida. The Jamaican Women of Florida is a nonprofit organization that empowers Jamaican women through networking, mentoring, and personal development. We thank you for being with us tonight, Dr. Keisha Gray.
Thank you, Andrea. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I'm excited about tonight's conversation.
As are we. We're gonna do some amazing things. And next we have Maggie Pelleya. And Maggie is also a member of the media, which excites me, media sister. Yay!
Yes, indeed.
She is the general manager of WDNA 88.9 FM in Miami, right here. She has been a part of that community public radio station since 1994, where she leads and collaborates with volunteers, full and part-time staff, and her board of directors to sustain and improve the station and its audience's services. Maggie facilitates all kinds of programs and supports, and as well as national and international radio and music relations. She is no stranger to being a panelist and speaks very frequently in our community. She's fluent in English, Spanish, and some French. She also is a U.S. citizen born in Cuba and has traveled wildly across the United States and abroad. Welcome, Maggie.
It's my pleasure to be here with you and so many wonderful women of the Caribbean.
Absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. And next up, one of, I would say, a personal friend and colleague, one of my favorite people, also Rishma Eckarts. She is a business law attorney who represents entrepreneurs and companies both domestically and internationally. She is a native of both Belize and Guyana, and she remains very much engaged in the Caribbean community in South Florida. She's a board member of and general counsel for the Belize American Chamber of Commerce of Florida, and she's also a board member of the Guyanese American Chamber of Commerce. This lady means business. Mrs. Eckert focuses her passions and practice on domestic and international company formation, and she's always strongly advocating for the advancement of women in the Caribbean. Rishma Eckarts, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for all our listeners out there. And it's great to meet our other panelists as well. Thank you.
It's an honor. And last but definitely not least, and I am going to do my best to get her name correctly throughout this entire program. It is Dr. Elia Ranjitsingh. Did I get that right? I want to make sure. Thank you. Very
Thank
excited.
you.
Dr. Ranjitsingh is faculty of CUNY. She's also the author of Women's Political Leadership in Trinidad and Tobago. She is an adjunct assistant professor in Africana Studies at the Africana Studies Department of Brooklyn College at City University of New York. She also lectures in the Department of Ethnic and Race Studies at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. And she's been published several times in Intercultural Studies, the Caribbean Journal of International Relations and Diplomacy, as well as the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. She has done some amazing work, and we can expect new work from her new text coming out in June of 2021. Welcome,
so
Dr. Ranjitsingh.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for everyone for joining us, for such an important conversation this evening. Thank you again.
We are so excited, and thank you. So women have always provided great influence within the political arena in both leadership as well as supportive capacities. And tonight, we're going to be talking about how women have led nations and supported socioeconomic development across the region, as well as using the recent inauguration of the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris as our backdrop and as our framework for tonight's discussions. Our panelists will be sharing past successes, our present state of affairs, and certainly what I think is probably the most important, but our perspectives for the future. As a mother of daughters, that is so critical. What do we envision for women in government from 2021 and beyond? And so, with no further ado, let's get this party started, right? And just an aside, just because I want to tell you this, viewers, I'm channeling my Kamala tonight. Got my pearls and I do have my chucks on, but I'm not gonna lift my legs up. But anyhow, so I want to ask the panelists. And I'm going to start with Dr. Ranjitsingh. Is there one particular Caribbean woman in politics whom you admire? And if so, who is she? And what do you admire about her? And how do you, in your perspective, how has she influenced policies and as well as maybe your life?
Definitely. There are a number of Caribbean women in politics that I do admire. Those who are very visible, and particularly those who are, in the background. But the one person I do want to speak about today, she actually was a former woman in politics in Trinidad and Tobago, and she actually passed away this week at the age of 107, and that is Dame Louise Horn, who was the first senator to be appointed in Trinidad and Tobago by the former president, Sir Ellis Clark, and Dame Louise Horn, right? One of her legacies that lives on today in Trinidad and Tobago is the National School Feeding Program. Louise Horn, she trained as a nutritionist, so that was very important, for her and to her, that the nation's children, particularly those, who didn't have the privilege of bringing, having lunches every day, right? Particularly bringing lunches to school, that they would be afforded, warm, hot, healthy lunches. And that legacy lives on today. The nation's children, they are fed daily. And I think, she was just an inspiration, and particularly for, women parliamentarians today. Upon her passing, present Member of Parliament, Penelope Beckles, spoke of how, she influenced her, right? Particularly Louise Horn's, her love for her country, her love for her city, Arima, a space that she lived for most of, of her life. And, in an interview that she conducted when she was actually 99, right, she spoke about, wanting to see the world, and she did that. And, she lived, bravely and boldly. And she is an inspiration, and she did pass away, sadly, at the young age of 107. So.
What a legacy. Thank you so much for sharing. And school lunches, I mean, that just lives on. That's and 100. Amazing. And so, how about you, Maggie? Is there one particular Caribbean woman in politics whom you admire? And who is she?
Well, none that are living right now. There was a woman who passed away in 81, Elena Mederos, and she was a suffragist in the 1920s and 30s. And so when she went into exile, she started the School of Social Work in the University of Havana in the 1940s. And then when she was forced into exile in 1962, she went to Washington, D.C., and started an organization called Of Human Rights. And so calling into the very important issue of human rights in Cuba and worldwide as well, because she represented any of the organizations that were fighting for human rights, no matter where. So that is somebody who I admire.
And sounds like she has made major contributions to Cuba as well.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
No,
the reason is I can't speak especially for Cuba right now, because I've been away since 1960. And so because there is a totalitarian regime there, and the issues are never as clear. And certainly women have always played a very important part in Cuban politics pre-Castro, the senators and representatives and the like. And so they've always been a very important part of Cuban politics. And here in the United States, it's a little bit different. We're not as many as there were over there.
Understood. Well, sounds like a lovely lady who's made a strong mark. And so, I want to talk a little bit about the region, just overall. And so what are some of the nuances and highlights related to women in government overall in the Caribbean? And so, I'm going to ask maybe Dr. Keisha Gray to just weigh in, give us your perspective.
So in particular, I think for me, women in politics in the Caribbean have definitely played an integral role in the development of our country. In all the countries in the Caribbean, women in government in the Caribbean have paved the path even for women in government here. I'll use up as the trailblazer for women in politics in Jamaica. She was one of the first women I identified with as a teenager, advocating for children, advocating for women and their advancement in politics, not just in Jamaica, but throughout the Caribbean. And it was because of the path that she paved why we see so many Jamaican women not only advancing to positions within government locally in Jamaica, but also here. And so I think it is an important role when women are in government. We see advancement for things like equal rights, equal pay opportunities. So women in the Caribbean have really raised the bar and have advocated in their own way on their own islands for pay equity. And that is a key thing that for our families and for the economic development for our Caribbean nation that needs to happen.
Absolutely. We play such a foundation in really, from everything that I've read, establishing parity and equity. And when we do it, it's not only just for ourselves. It's not just about women, but we work for children. We work for our men. We work for the family. We work for, society.
Yes,
and so,
we do. And go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, and as a child advocate, maybe speak to us for a little bit from that perspective as well.
So I think one of the things that's important as we think about why it's important to see women in politics and to see women who look like us in places of government is that the advocacy for children rises to the occasion when women are in position. For example, here locally, we're fighting the good fight for our children. I am very much elated when I see women in politics here. For example, Commissioner Denise Grant, Commissioner Melissa Dunn, as well as Mayor Hazel Rogers. And I think about, in particular, when we think about child advocacy, one of the things that stands out for me is last year, Mayor Hazel Rogers and Commissioner Denise at the time, now Vice Mayor Denise Grant did a child seat safety program where they brought families in and made sure their car seats were put in the right way and educated families about how to keep children safe in their cars. And those kinds of programs really help to educate and keep our children, our babies safe so that they can eventually become adults in our community. So it's those little things. Having been moms themselves, having seen what was happening in our community, their ability to advocate and to really be trailblazers in that area, and even mentoring each other as a new woman on the ground of politics, newly elected officials. It was amazing just to see how Mayor Hazel Rogers has really wrapped her hands around our commissioners and new women to government here locally and supported them.
Wow, that's such a great testimony. And we are very fortunate here in South Florida that we do have a significant representation in terms of women in politics. And that's a really good segue for globally, right? And as well as within the region and across the diaspora. So the US, Canada, UK, parts of the continents of Africa. Who are some of the women and the roles that they have played, and why do we think that on a global scale, we've just talked a little bit on the local level, but on that global scale, that their impact, what have they done, who are they, and why has it been important and noteworthy? I mean, why are we having this conversation is kind of what I'm asking through that question.
Okay, do you want me to continue going?
Sure, yes.
Okay. I wanted to chime someone else in. So I think for me, when I think about advocacy, in particular right now on the global front, I think about the stories we have heard of women who have been held accountable in ways that are barbaric, that do not support the development of women. And across the globe, you can think about different things that happen in different countries. But in particular, now I want to use this space because this is an important space to be holding right now, to really talk about the need to protect our young girls. And when I think about who has advocated for girls, I think about not just women in politics, but also women, normal women who do not hold leadership positions. And I think back to a case right now in Jamaica that is happening right now for Keisha Jackson, where she was not protected. We had a male that preyed on her, 20 years old, and he killed her because she said no. And women who advocate for other women and advocate for keeping our children, our youth safe, are those women that I want to bring to the table now and to hold space to make sure that as a global movement in our own communities, that we are holding the rights of our girls and our young women at the center of our fight. And so for me right now, it's each and every woman in Jamaica that's holding that space right now for Keisha, and just wanting to make sure that, her perpetrator will be held accountable. It is the woman on a local front, on a global fight. I think about human trafficking. And here on the global front, I think about people like Jamara Johnson and Tabitha Bush, who here locally are really advocating and educating our community on what human trafficking looks like. And that is something that it's a global fight, because our children, our young girls, are being trafficked across borders. They're being trafficked online. And that, again, is another area where, as a community, and this is a global pandemic, the trafficking of our young girls, we need to keep our young girls safe.
Wow, that was certainly a lot of unpacking, and I appreciate that, because at this time we are experiencing, me being from Jamaica, I have been kind of observing what's happening in the news. And from what I can see, this is sparking the ire of women, not just in Jamaica, but in the Caribbean and Jamaicans within our diaspora, to really look at making changes. And so, I want to go to Rishma. Rishma, on that global stage, you are representing two islands. And I think that is just like the
countries. They're not islands.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
They're
You are
not islands.
absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And so that's the Jamaican in me. And so you are representing two countries of the region. So talk to us a little bit about, what happens in that space for women in politics, the process, and who do you admire in either one or both spaces?
Absolutely. And, it would be remiss of me to not give my disclaimer that I have never been a part of any political party or in politics in either Belize or Guyana. And I am on the outside looking in. So this is my personal opinion of what's happening. I do want to make a distinction. I believe some of the panelists have talked about it before as well. The UNDP makes a distinction between political participation and political representation. So in terms of political participation, that's women who are engaging in discussions like this and our panelists who are lobbying in very informal ways to be able to make change within our communities. Political representation are those who are actually in the government or in positions to legislate and make make a change and make differences within our countries. For Belize specifically, I think that we have a lot of women who are participated in politics. They are political participants, but not necessarily in representation spaces. So for example, we have women who are heads of unions. We have women that are heads of chambers. We have women who are councillors, for example, but we have very few women who are actually within that political party. So to sort of backtrack the original question, and I couldn't wait to jump in and be a little bit rebellious with my answer, I would like to pick Mia Mottley, who is the current PM of Barbados, as a person that I greatly admire in the way that she governs. Not because we don't have adequate, deserving people in Belize or Guyana, but because this is more timely, and I'm a business attorney, so I'm very much focused on business. What she did during the pandemic for Barbados was very admirable. What she ended up doing was creating a program where basically foreigners can ride out the pandemic in Barbados while being quarantined. They can work from being in Barbados. And it was a great way to sort of open the borders, but still close the borders and still keep the economy somewhat going while everyone was experiencing this pandemic. So for me, that policy that she put in place was so forward thinking and very innovative that I admire the way that she governs. And I wish that a lot of our leaders that we have right now, men and women, would be more innovative in the way that they think. So in terms of admirable, Mia Mottley is up there for me in the way that she governs and the way that she's innovative.
Thank you so much. And that's an excellent segue because, we have there's been mention of many, many names so far. And so a centurion, is that the right word? I don't even know. Somebody who's made it to over 100. Centurion, a suffragette, leaders, Mia Mottley. And so how did maybe the work that these women have done, are doing, did it help in preparing the stage for this U.S. Vice President, Kamala Harris?
I believe that it did because it shows women in a position of power. I mean, you can't get hired and being the PM of a country. So they show that women are capable. We are very capable of being in those positions to be able to make change for their country. And like I said, be innovative, be the person that brings people together. So representation definitely matters. If you can see someone who looks like you and you see their potential and you see their leadership and you see how well they're doing within their own professions and how they can connect with people, that lays the stage for when a Kamala Harris decides to run, that it doesn't become too strange or taboo. It just becomes, here's another powerful West Indian immigrant woman who's doing their thing. And it really does create a situation where the more this starts to happen, the more it becomes, it doesn't become something that's out of the ordinary. It becomes the ordinary. And we want to get to a place where this becomes the ordinary. And I give this, I believe I've told you, Andrea, in the past too, where Kamala Harris's middle name is Davy. So is mine. And so is my eldest daughter. So when she became vice president, I told my daughter, do you know, the vice president's middle name is Davy? And she goes, wow, that's my middle name too. So just seeing something like that paves the way for all our children that are coming up right now to see that face, that representation, so that they can see that they are in these positions of power as well. It's not just a white man's world anymore, or, in the US, because I am in the US, but it's not a white man's world anymore. We have people who can represent us and represent our communities, represent our values, our traditions, our, way of thinking. It's not just secular anymore, where it's just that one institutional masculine strain of thought for politics. It's worldwide and it's global.
That is absolutely just such a valuable and poignant sharing. And I love the fact that your daughter is able to identify with such, the name is just powerful, Mom, but just also a powerful middle name that, has made history. Amazing,
Exactly.
Great sharing. So let me ask, I'm going to go to Dr. Aleah. Looking at the US and also looking at the Caribbean, we see that there seems to be a lot of representation from some areas and maybe not. So in the Caribbean, we see, there are several countries that are doing really well. I believe Trinidad and Guyana are two that are over 30% in terms of women represented in elected capacities. And then here in the United States, my anecdotal data is, we see quite a bit of course, Jamaican women, some Haitian American women, Bahamian women, but then the space kind of tightens outside of that. What is your perspective? What does you certainly delve very deep into all of this. So shed some light on what the data really looks like in that regard, as well as why you think it's so.
Yeah, well, in the Caribbean region, the statistics, it's very uneven, right? We have Cuba, 53.4%, Grenada, 46% of women in the parliament, 46% of persons in the parliament are women. Trinidad actually at 26%, Guyana, 35%. And, spaces like Guyana, we see such high numbers because of mechanism of the quota system, which very much, we see that political parties in Guyana must allow, in terms of submitting candidates for election, right? 1/3 of those candidates must be women. So we see these mechanisms, which have proved successful in spaces like Guyana, spaces like Rwanda. And I believe that, mechanisms like these, should be, instituted, in other spaces as well. I don't know, but the Caribbean, presents this paradox in that, even though girls and women, we are outperforming boys and men on every level of education, it's not translating into the workforce and in terms of political leadership. And we see, it really boils down to society, and particularly constructs of gender, where we see in Caribbean societies, there's still this understanding that political leadership and leadership, as a whole is masculine, right? It's something that men do, right? Doing research in Trinidad in between 2013 and 2015, and, doing these campaign walks with 2 political candidates, and, just plainly asking people along the street, do you think women can lead? And, the number of no's I received, even though at that time Trinidad had elected its first female prime minister. So, leadership and politics is still very much seen, as a thing that men do. And women are still very much, constricted, right, to these, notions, particularly around femininity and respectability and motherhood, etc. So I do think it is a societal issue. And, particularly how women are socialized, right? Women are, many women believe they're not qualified. Women who put their families and their careers first. So they think that being involved in politics will be a third career. I also put the onus on the political parties themselves, right, who do not recruit women, right, in high numbers. right? We only see this existing, particularly where we have quota systems existing, like in Guyana and spaces like Rwanda. And, there's also this lack of funding towards organizations which provide, training for women, right? Training for political candidates, training for female parliamentarians, mentoring, etc. So this is why, you see this sort of, these disparities throughout the Caribbean space. Because we don't see these mechanisms, particularly the quotas or, organizations actually providing training or having the funding to do so. And of course, Belize is a very interesting case study. And we spoke about this, Andrea, and, Rishma is here as well. And I thank her for that, speaking to that distinction between political participation and political leadership. And, Belize, right, at one point, only 3% of the persons in parliament were women. And what's interesting is that one of the preeminent organizations which, seek to train Caribbean women in terms of, political leadership, CUNY, Caribbean Women in Leadership, actually, it was this year that their newest chapter, I'm not sure what's the right word, their newest chapter was founded in Belize. So let's see, what comes out of that.
Very exciting. So, you spoke a lot to the Caribbean region, and that's great information. I know that the quota systems have almost doubled, it seems like, based on a UN, I believe it was a UN report, in 10 years. So there has been effectiveness. Now, do we have any thoughts in terms of here in the United States where it seems that women, Caribbean women, may have a little bit more access to hanging their hat in the political arena? Do we know why we see more certain countries, and we haven't mentioned Haiti, but we do see quite a bit of Haitian American women in elected office. Any thoughts on that, Dr. Aleah?
You said it. Access is of utmost importance there. Access. In terms of the women in the U.S. who are in political office, I think of Cori Bush, right, who was elected last year, right, to Congress. I think of Alexandria Cortez. And the reason why I think of these women is because they entered the political arena without access to political power, without the wealth, without the name. And research has shown that these are things which enable women right into the political sphere, right? Wealth, access to power, etc. And these are things that usually women do not have access to. So this oftentimes would limit I'm sorry to use the word access again, but it would limit their access, right, to the political sphere. And these are women, Cori Bush, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. These women were activists. They were on the ground. They were in their communities. Cori Bush, who came to prominence in 2014, right, at the time of the Ferguson protests, right? She worked as an organizer, right? And these are women who were able to, to access the political space, but without these things. And I think this is why there is a dearth of women, right, in politics, particularly in the US, right? It is, again, access, this idea of not being, understanding themselves as not being qualified. And it speaks to how just politics is understood, right? And I think of, Malcolm X, right, in his speech, The Ballot or the Bullet, and he says that we must begin to understand what politics can produce in our lives. And, I believe that it begins, with young girls. Before we get to women, trying to access these political spaces, we have to begin with young girls and their socialization and how they understand how politics works and how, they have a space there. And it's really about women taking up space.
I love that. And I want to delve real deep into the young girls, the socialization, and getting young women on track. I believe it was Natalie Robinson who put in the comments earlier, I would love to enter into political office. And so, I want us to really delve into that just a little bit further. But before we move on to our next section, I would like for you all to take a moment to just pay attention and learn a little bit more about Island Space Caribbean Museum, a place where Caribbean cultures unite.
Join us and let's make history together. Magic at the Museum, the Island Space Global Launch and Fundraiser, goes live on Sunday, June 6th at 6 p.m. It's a celebration of Caribbean history, culture, and entertainment with a 2021 twist. Learn more at islandspacefl.org/magic and donate today.
Welcome back. I'm Andrea JohnBaptiste, and I am your host this evening for this Women's History Month's panel as we are talking about Caribbean women in government. So, we have a West Indian woman in the White House, Kamala Harris. Now what? And our esteemed panel has just talked to us a little bit about what has happened around the Caribbean as well as across the diaspora. And so now we're going to drill down just a little bit deeper in terms of what is happening in the here and now. We took a little bit of a histrionic view, and now let's look at the present as we prepare for the future. Maggie, I'm going to ask, in terms of your observations and experiences, where do you see the intersection of race, gender, age, language, and culture as it relates to either becoming elected, remaining elected, being reelected, or getting on that pathway to election?
Well, it starts at the ground level. You know, the activism is very, very important, and for all women going into politics to get to go to learn their community. As I see a trend is women who are university trained, women who are graduates, who particularly are attorneys. So it's, the education of women is very, very important because it is a competitive, very competitive field to get into politics. Many years ago, I was involved in political campaigns for Marta Prado. This is talking about the 70s, but then the Democratic Party wasn't interested in having a Cuban woman be part of the Democratic Party. And so, it never made it, never had their support. So unfortunately, getting into politics either takes a lot of money or takes a lot of sweat. But a woman has to be prepared to go into it. As I see it, I see women who have succeeded in politics, such as Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, and she was a Republican woman. However, she was very much an activist for women's right, for women's equal pay, for having a transgender child. She was very much an advocate for that, and she couldn't take the administration much longer. We do have a couple of other Cuban American women in the New York area. Nicole Maliotakis, I think her name is. Her father is Greek, her mother Cuban. Maria Elvira Salazar, who lately took over Donna Shalala's team. I don't know where she is politically, as well as far as business women is concerned, but whether it is whatever it is, it's education, and it has to be a very, very strong part of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, thank you, because I agree in terms of the education. I agree in terms of the money and so on. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Keisha Gray, who works on various advocacy efforts and things of that nature. But what does it take to get a woman elected? From the macro level all the way drilled down.
So I want to follow up on a conversation that we started a little bit, where we talked about the importance to start with our young girls. And I think the reason why that's important is, when Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, got elected, Black women, Black girls now see somebody sitting in what is one of the highest seats in the world as a vice president. And that was monumental. I remember celebrating it. And I want us to really think about what that means. And because of that, young girls, young women, and even older women now see an opportunity to sit in that seat. What I think we need to do in our communities is to create spaces for young girls to get involved. And what that can look like is to actually create youth councils within your city leadership boards where young girls, in particularly Black girls, being represented at the seat, helping leaders in the community make decisions for the communities that they live and thrive in. Mm-hmm. And so I would like, go ahead.
No, I agree. I think, and I want us to delve into this, but I want us to really get into some of the strategies overall as we look at the future. So as you're talking about setting up those councils, do we think things of that nature are easier here in the United States or across the Caribbean? And if so, why? And what are some of the barriers you think?
So I think I have to commend Jamaica as well, because I've definitely seen the space being created on the island for young people to get involved with politics. And currently we have the super 18 women who were elected to office in Jamaica in our last general election. And that brought us to now 28.5% of women being in government in Jamaica. That is monumental. And I think that is actually happening because of the spaces that were created for young people to get involved in politics. So is it hard? Yes, it is. Can it be done? Yes, it is. Men need to get on board, support young girls, support young women in getting into that space. One of the other things that's a problem is, as you know, when you're running for office, you need money. And so young men, women need to support young women, young girls when they want to achieve that goal. And they can do that by supporting their political campaigns. And not only give to that older man who you've known since they've been forever. And sometimes also men need to move out of the way. Out of the way and create a space for young women to get elected. And that might mean you having to say no.
Yeah. So, you know, I agree with you. But I also want to talk a little bit, because you keep saying young women, and, you know, there are women my age, still young, but who are looking. And I guess I posed the question to Maggie, and I'll pose it to you. And I guess, Rishma, you also want to weigh in here. But what about that age? You know, you're saying the young girls, and I get that. But what about the intersection of age? Where does that factor in? And I'm not sure if that's where you wanted to go, Rishma, but go.
No, I do want to jump in terms of the question of whether it's easier in the US versus our own communities. My opinion, exponentially easier in the US than it is in Belize. Women in politics in Belize is abysmal. And I can say that because I'm not in politics. So I'm an outsider looking in, and this is my opinion on it. We have, as the other panelists mentioned, one of the lowest rates of female political representation in the Caribbean. And that's a lot of different factors that, you know, I guess I can go through them, but you let me know how you want to lead the conversation. But it is a lot easier here in the US because we have had this resurgence of the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement and female empowerment. We've been working on that for a really long time. And it is easier here, I believe, for women to have that space, that seat at the table, than it is in somewhere like Belize, for example, where only 2 of our ministries are held. 2 of 18 ministries are held by women.
So, that's, I think that I find it very intriguing, your representation. And you and I talked offline about this because you're representing, and not that you're representing each of those countries, but your
I have familiarity with both.
Right, and with
Yes.
both spaces, and I say that because viewers, what you may not be aware of is Belize has some of the lowest rates, and Guyana has some of the highest rates, and so it's so interesting and intriguing to me. But so, talk to us a little bit about what you think are those, or what the research says in terms of the causative factors for the poor or the low representation in Belize.
Part of the disparity that we talk about Belize and Guyana, and I believe it's because of also when we achieved independence. Belize is a relatively young country. We achieved independence in 1981. So this year we're coming up on 40. Where, you're putting this in a category with countries like Guyana, they got independence, I believe it's like in the 70s, and other parts of the Caribbean were much earlier than we were. So they've had the benefit of experience and age and time that Belize hasn't had. Now, I'm not making excuses for the abysmal numbers. I'm just saying that could be a factor as well. In Belize, I think that we are still living in a very, as the UN puts it, institutionalized masculinity within our politics. Women are still being discriminated against within the society. They don't have the connections, or the other panelists talked about access. They don't have the access because they've not been in positions of power. So we have our male counterparts that are helping each other because they are the ones that are currently in power. We have, and we have to talk about it even though it's uncomfortable, we have what the UN calls a double burden as well. Yes, we're working, we have our professions, we're educated, but we're also seen in many Caribbean societies as the ones who take care of our household. We're taking care of our household, we're taking care of our children. We have a double burden to contend with that a lot of our male counterparts don't. So, when we're struggling to try to figure out dinner and getting uniforms together and packing lunches, sometimes other men in similar positions are not doing the same. So we have that. And again, it's a tradition. I want to say that it's institutionalized where women are seen in that role. It doesn't have to be indicative of every single household, but it really is, seen that way. If you go to someone's house and it's messy, instinctively in the Caribbean, we're like, wow, she doesn't take care of her house. Not that they do not take care of their house, but that the wife didn't clean. So those are the types of really deeply rooted stereotypes that we fight against, along with the discrimination, the double burden. One of your panelists talked about the lack of financial resources that comes with not being in those spaces of political power. All those things contribute. It's just a society that we definitely have to figure out ways. The youth councils sound amazing that the panelist was talking about, but we have to find ways to start at even the educational level, like have an educational campaign from the government to talk about how women can be incorporated and taken into the fold by other women and by the men, their male counterparts as well. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be from the ground up. I think it needs an entire revamping, and they need to make opportunities and spaces for women like us. And we talk about being attorneys. Yes, we're kind of in everything, but making spaces for women who are rebellious in their thought, people who are not just going to be going along with the status quo, because that is what's needed to make a change within your country. So in preparing for this panel, I thought about reaching out to the two women who are currently in the ministries. The only 2 out of 18 that are in the ministries. I thought about reaching out to them. And you know what? I didn't. And you know why I didn't? Not because I didn't think that they would respond, not because I didn't think that they would be, kind towards giving me feedback or whatnot. I thought about it from the point of view, are they really going to throw their male counterparts under the bus and talk about why other women are precluded from being part of politics? No, they're not. Mm-hmm. And not because they are not rebellious in their thought as well, but because they also look at their political futures. Mm-hmm. We just had an election, November 11th. They are new to their positions. Mm-hmm. Are they going to now have a discourse with me and give me their opinion about why women are barred Probably not. So I actually didn't even reach out because I know that there is that status quo that they're trying to get along with. They're trying to make space for themselves within their new positions. And it's very hard to be in a male-oriented world and then decides to rock the boat afterwards and throw them under the bus. So, you know, it's really difficult to break that barrier. And that's why our numbers are very abysmal in Belize.
That is, you know, you've just, wow, really opened, been very illuminating in your response. And I think that was wise because as new women getting, you know, like you said, making room for themselves and figuring out how they are going to maybe rock the boat, so to speak, in the future. So I thank you for that. Now, you know, I would be remiss if I did not go back to Maggie and ask the role of media in all of this. For viewers, many of you know that I also have a radio show. It is completely focused on business, music, business, and culture. But as a member of the media, I do feel responsibility for many things. And so I'm trying to find out from you, Maggie, as a station manager in a very large market, what's the role of media in either getting women elected or keeping them in political office?
Well, in my particular case, I run a radio station that basically airs music, but it airs jazz particularly. But in my many years, of course, throughout WDNA's history, we currently have people on the air and broadcasting who are from Jamaica, from Trinidad and Tobago, from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, from the Dominican Republic. And so we have that variety of cultures that we've grown up with. We've not really been much involved with helping out in politics in the recent years. There was a time before when we had a format where we had a lot of talk shows and we had community forums where we had different candidates come up. My role, I think, has been basically to open the station. You know, the whole thing of, oh, how do you create diversity and et cetera, et cetera? Well, you open your doors to the community so that if, you know, a young woman opens my door, knocks on my door and says, I'm a student at Miami-Dade College and I'm interested in broadcasting and journalism. Can I do an internship? Sure, you can. You know, a lot of radio stations don't do that. And so I open our doors to young women who are interested in journalism and broadcasting so that they can get their feet wet. They know how a radio station works, how journalism works. And so that has been our role as a media company. And again, welcome people from all cultures through music, and that's the way that we unite, but not very much involving people in politics.
Well, thank you for that. And it's great that you are creating that internship or mentorship space for women in media, because even though they may not be learning about political strategies there, but they are learning about mass communications, and that, my friends, we know can, you know, open doors or close them. We serve as gatekeepers. We serve as highlighters in the media for women, for those that we like, for those that we don't like. And so I think I'm very appreciative that WDNA is providing that opportunity so that folks can at least get their feet wet and then take it and, you know, go and have their own political radio station or radio show or communication sector. So I thank you, Maggie. Now, you know, I want to ask maybe Dr. Aleah a little bit about, as we talked about that macro look around the country and so on, are there any things, do we see more so a political divide, conservative versus liberal? And is there any common themes that maybe transcend political divide that we should be tapping into, holding firm to ensure that no matter what side of the aisle we sit on, wherever we are, whether it's here in the United States or in the Caribbean, that we can prioritize and come together and move us forward. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there is this ideological divide. Of course, in the US, conservative, liberal. In the Caribbean space, it may not be that that language isn't used, but women in politics, are often on this, this tightrope. They have to very much balance these understandings, of themselves, as women. They're understood as the mothers of the nation, and I think of Eugenia Charles of, Dominica, or the wise sage, right, Mia Motley. But still having to maintain these strict notions of women's respectability, etc. Dame Eugenia Charles, for instance, she was often critiqued. She was never married, she didn't have children, right? So even though she led Dominica for so many years, right, in many ways she did not very much follow through, right, with regards to these notions around femininity and womanhood and motherhood, etc. Within the Caribbean space, this ideological divide oftentimes rests with that, and particularly issues such as women's right to choose, issues particularly around legislations on homosexual rights and gay rights. And we see oftentimes this is where the divide it exists. And I think particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, our first Prime Minister, Kamala Harris, appointing one of the ministers of gender and youth affairs, Verna St. Rose. And at this time, there was discussion that, with a woman Prime Minister, quite possibly, maybe the gender policy, which had been, laid in the Parliament as a green paper in 2009, would have, come, into law, would have been signed. And, Verna St. Rose, she had voiced her support for a woman's right to choose, and she voiced her support for, the decriminalization of homosexuality in Trinidad, and she was fired. This is exactly what happened. She was fired in June 2012, having been, in that role for quite possibly a year or so. And this is where we see, that divide, and, many persons, not trying to or attempting to lose the support, particularly, within populations that, I don't want to say populations that are religious, but, are very much, anti, rights for, for all people, regardless of sexual orientation. But there are common values, right? Particularly, and there are at least common, these issues that, we see women very much, coming, gathering around, regardless of political party or regardless of, other ideologies, right? And some of these issues are, violence against women. I was interested to hear what's happening in Jamaica, because the same is occurring in Trinidad, right? Particularly the murder of two young women, Ashanti Riley and Andrea Barrett. And we see women in Trinidad, and particularly women in political office, both political parties, very much crossing the aisle to try to create legislation, particularly, around, protecting women, right, from such violence, etc. So, there are these common issues that we see women, particularly in the Caribbean spaces, coming, around to support. But, ideologically, we see, there are these divides, right, which very much exist. And, these divides are very much rooted within these societies, right, within Caribbean societies.
That is such an interesting perspective. And, I want us to definitely delve into violence against women, because I do believe that there is a significant tie-in to legislation. But before we move on to our next section, where we'll be talking about the future, how do we put systems in place, and what do we do as individuals and the collective to create that political landscape or tapestry that we envision for the 21st century and beyond? Now, here's a message from Island Space Caribbean Museum, a place where Caribbean cultures unite.
Join us and let's make history together. Magic at the Museum, the Island Space Global Launch and Fundraiser, goes live on Sunday, June 6th at 6 p.m. It's a celebration of Caribbean history, culture, and entertainment with a 2021 twist. Learn more at islandspacefl.org/magic and donate today.
Welcome back. We have a West Indian woman in the White House. Now what? But before we get into that, I just want to make a shameless plug. Please go over to our website, make a donation, because as you can see, I'm right here at the museum right now, and it is a beautiful space. If you have not visited, we are at the Broward Westfield Mall in Plantation. Plenty of parking. We're open Thursdays through Sundays, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Please come on in, see the exhibits. But to do all of that, we need money. Yes, we do, honey. And so we are asking you to help us keep the lights on, keep the staff paid, keep the place clean, keep us safe, right? We have all these great artifacts that we need security. So please, if you are so inclined, nothing is too small. And for the Jamaicans who are in the audience, you will know every mickle make a muckle. So go on over and give your mickles, because we need that muckle. So that's my shameless plug. And I am so excited to be with this esteemed panel of media representatives, educators, community leaders. And, we have pretty much dissected some of the history, what's gone on or what's going on with women in the Caribbean, as well as the diaspora in government. And so now, we have been chomping at that bit because we've been wanting to talk about creating the future. I think a lot of us have kind of had enough of the here and now. We appreciate some of our forerunners and front runners and pioneers, but we're ready to take the mantle and make things happen. And so we have a great question on the screen right now from Amanda Bedminster. How can women, and I'm going to ask one of our panelists, whoever is interested, to jump in here. How can women in leadership positions push their communities to be active in political participation or representation? Excellent question. And so I'm going to ask, who would like to jump in? I have a feeling Dr. Gray. I was going to say, I had a feeling Dr. Keisha was going to jump in on this. Yes, please.
So I think with this in particular, my answer to this is twofold. As an immigrant to the United States, I'll answer it from that perspective first. And I believe that in my position as being the president of the Jamaican Women of Florida, I have a responsibility to educate Jamaican women, Jamaican immigrants to the United States, and in particular to Florida, more about government and what that looks like in the United States. Growing up, coming to the countries, it happens very.
I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. There we go. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Come on in.
Continue?
Yes.
I think it is important for us.
Yes. We can hear you, Dr. Gray. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think it is important for us to educate each other, educate especially immigrants to this community, to the United States about government, what that means here, and how they can get involved in their local government, what their vote means, and to explain the ballot to them. So a lot of that has to do with educating community about what their roles and responsibilities are. And we can do that in a variety of different ways. Going out into communities, PSAs. I think I'll give an example for the Jamaican Women of Florida. We did a simple thing last year, which during the census, we educated our members about what the census means and why it was important for us to complete the census, because a lot of times, you come here and people think if you complete that sheet of paper, now the government can track it. And so it was important for them to understand that by completing the census, that in particularly meant funding for their communities, funding for their schools. And it was amazing. By the time we were done with the session, a number of people completed their census right there and called family members and asked them to complete it. So as leaders in our organizations and in the community, we have a responsibility to educate our immigrants, fellow Caribbean nationals here about their roles that they need to play to make sure that the right person gets selected. And it is important, even in Jamaica, to do the same. A lot of times I remember growing up hearing things like, I'm not going by the voting because my vote not going to count. And within the last election, I was so proud to see so many of my friends and family members, for many of them, they voted for their first time. And so it is important as leaders that we play a role in educating community for them to understand the importance and for them to know that their vote does matter and what happens if they don't vote.
And to
I just want to say thank you so much, Amanda, for that question, and thank you for that very detailed response, Dr. Gray. Yes, Rishma, please.
Yes, to add to Dr. Gray, I think it's really important for women who are in a powerful position to find a commonality of purpose and a commonality of issues with those within the community. And the reason that becomes important is because not only do you have a racial divide that you talked about before, but you have a socioeconomic divide where members of the community might see that you are in a position of power, but you're up there and I'm down here. So what are you advocating for? How can you help me? But you have to show commonality of purpose. If it's discrimination, if it's violence against women, if it's equal voting rights, whatever that purpose may be, we as women in a political sense have to show others within the community as well that we share the same struggle. Real recognizes real, struggle recognizes struggle. So we have to show them that even though you are in a position where you are sort of, in that powerful position, that you still share a commonality with them and you will advocate for them the way that you would advocate for yourself. So there's also that social economic divide that you have to sort of bridge that gap. And it becomes really important for us to be able to connect, for all women to be able to connect across party lines, across social economic lines, across racial lines. That's where we get our power from. More in, it's more powerful when we have our numbers together. Mm-hmm. So, we have to make sure that we have that commonality of purpose as well.
Commonality, real knows real. I love that. Absolutely. And share that we understand, even though we may not have that exact struggle at this particular time, mm-hmm. but we're
still women. Absolutely. We're still women and we still share maybe on a sort of different level, but we still share the same basic purpose that we're fighting for.
Mm-hmm. Good word from Rishma Eckarts. And so, Maggie, I want to just go to you for a minute, because one of the things that I admire a lot in Miami, there seems to always be a lot of female representation in all of the elections. When I drive through all parts of, Miami-Dade County, which is huge, there are billboards all over of many, many women. So you may see 6 billboards and probably 2 or 3 of them are of women. What do we think, is that unique to Miami? It seems like it might be, but what's going on there, in your opinion, that helps to maybe galvanize, or for lack of a better term, draw out these women?
Well, I think historically, you have to think that Miami was really founded by a woman, which is Julia Tuttle. So it's always had this idea that women can be part of politics, can make things move and make things happen. In South Florida, of course, we have only one woman, well, Cuban woman, Rebecca Sosa, in the Miami-Dade County Commission. Of course, now we have Daniela Levin Cava as the Miami-Dade County mayor, and that's wonderful. And of course, we've had Barbara Jordan, a longtime commissioner. We have so many women in government. It's been very successful. That for many mentors or women to look up to, whether it's in Miss Gibson in Coconut Grove, Enid Pigney, activist in the Overtown area, women in business like Miss Athalie Range. We've had, well, in government, we had the first Cuban City of Miami Commissioner Rosario Kennedy a while back, city managers of Doral and South Miami in Yvonne Soler. But women are not afraid. They'll jump into it because they know their community, and they're quite known to make things happen. Mm-hmm. And so, and they've been fairly good about raising money as well, and that's why they're up there on billboards and yes. Are being elected. So it looks good for women of all places to be elected in this down in South Florida.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
The future looks
and
bright.
I think our future does look very,
but again,
very bright,
it's an uphill battle because the fundraising is the biggest hurdle for anyone. You have my good friend Gypsy Metellus, who ran, but then she didn't make it. But she'll do it next time. She'll do it. She'll try it again, and she'll be successful.
Absolutely.
She's not gonna give up.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that sharing and that word of encouragement, because I do know that in our viewers, we do have individuals who have either been elected or ran for political office. And so those of you, if you want to throw your comment in the chat, I did it. I was one of them. I persisted, or something of that nature. We welcome you, and we want to say a big salute, because as we have been discussing, we hear that there are many challenges with becoming elected. And so the fact that you even got onto the ballot, I say salute, salute, salute. So our future looks bright in Miami, and we have Miami was founded by a woman. And so women seemingly are significantly empowered in that area. Now, structurally, systemically, how do we recreate other areas that, or replicate the Miami model, I'm going to call it, for getting women elected? We hear a barrier is funds, and I'm going to ask Dr. Aleah to just weigh in on some of that.
Yes, definitely. Access to funding, right? Running a campaign is expensive. So, women need to be, or, I don't want to put it all on the woman, right? There need to be the right, mechanisms that very much, can facilitate this, right? In terms of organizations. I know there are organizations within the Caribbean, there are organizations here which very much seek to identify women to run for office, train them, mentor them. And of course, within this training is also, how to fundraise, etc. So, there needs to be this, and again, I don't want to put the onus on women, right? Because there needs to be the structural change, right? That has to occur, right? Particularly in, political parties. And political parties are, at its core, very, they're these very masculinist, androcentric structures. So, there has to be the patriarchal landscape has to shift within political parties themselves in terms of, them recruiting more women. Of course, women's access to funding. And I must say, in terms of, women, running for any sort of office, be it local government or, the highest office, right, not Trinidad and Tobago, in the US, right, president, vice president, we see, women, they are now vulnerable, to critique and scrutiny. And I think, this is why training and mentorship is very important. And it is why many women refuse to run for office, refuse to, to take up that burden, right? I think Rishma had spoken about the double burden, right? So they refuse to take up that third burden, right, of being, in public life. Just trying to get back to the question here, right? So accessing resources in that way, accessing training and mentorship. There must be these shifts again within the political party itself and how the political party, particularly in the US, how they work, how they select candidates in terms of, qualifications, background, etc. I think it was Dr. Gray spoke about, men moving out of the way, and they should make space for women to take up space. So yes, there are definitely some, some true structural changes that must take place, but also, changes that are, things that are occurring right now in terms of, organizations providing mentorship, training, etc.
Excellent. And so, good segue because, first of all, let me just say congratulations, Julia Louise Spann, who said that she has been elected twice, both here in South Florida, I believe, as well as in Chicago. Yep. South Florida and Chicago. Congratulations. We salute you and we thank you for being a woman in government. So, Dr. Gray, you started in and you were very passionate about youth councils and things of that nature. And I know that you are a strong woman's advocate, but also a very strong child advocate. So what can those youth councils specifically look like? And what do we need within our communities to make them happen? Give us some very salient, step-by-step instructions on getting it done.
So, wow. How much time do I have? How much money do I have? Because, it is definitely something that I think we need for our communities. And, one of the things I think about, I'm going to in particular talk about the city of Plantation. And they actually have a youth council that they've been building out. And I think what it looks like is organizations, the school board, and when I say the school board, for those of us joining us from other countries, what I'm talking about, like your Ministry of Education, just for some parallels so we can understand. And it's in the classrooms, making it normalized to talk about politics and to make sure that even when you're doing school council, for example, competitions, that women are represented, and that if women are running, they are protected. And if they're not, if a situation happens, we need to talk about it, figure out what happened, and make sure that men and also other women know that if you treat a candidate ill, that is not right. And so in particular, for setting up your youth councils, you need to make sure you spend time educating youth about what the different roles are. What does it mean to have a strong arm government? What are some of those things? And a lot of young people don't know. A lot of young people don't know what it means, what it takes to be elected, how to run a successful campaign. And it's simple things like public speaking support for our young people, putting them in spaces when you're having panel discussions, making sure you create a space for young people to lead those conversations. That's some of the things that I do in a daily thing. Whenever I'm trying to do something in the community for youth, I make sure that youth have a space to participate in the conversation, to even lead the conversation. In youth councils, elected officials need to fund youth councils. other things that they can do is give them a space, give them activities to do in your youth councils when you're having your commission meeting. If it's, having them close it, having them open it, having them be involved. If you're having a bill go through, ask them their opinion, create opportunities for them to be involved in the decision making practices. So let's talk about COVID-19, for example. When as I was getting ready for this and thinking about what are some very good examples, I actually looked in Jamaica with COVID-19 and their fight for COVID-19. And I realized that they had a whole campaign that they were trying to get youth to get on board with, to help with educating youth about how to be safe during this pandemic. And so it's creating spaces like that so youth understand what roles they can play. And I'm also about compensating our youth. Their lived experience, their knowledge is not for free. If you can create a compensation strategy where you're actually compensating them for their time, I think that is also important. And I have to, another model that I have to give Commissioner Melissa Dunn a shout out in the city of Lauderhill, where she's trying to do the Lauderhill Health and Prosperity Campaign. And she is ensuring that, as part of her role, youth are represented in that. And I think that needs to be replicated in cities and across. If you're doing something that's supposed to be groundbreaking, make sure youth are at the table. They're at the table. If you're going to create a survey, ask them if you are any kind of change that you need to have done in your community. Ultimately, youth, our children, there needs to be a cross section. And let's talk about race, right? I'm not just talking about, because a lot of times when we talk about youth councils and you see them right now, you see a lot of young white boys who are participating even at that level. And it's being intentional to going out and seeking Black girls, Latino girls, just to make sure that they're also represented on these youth councils. Look at your community, make sure your community is represented on your youth councils.
Wow, good strategies for that. And so, you mentioned kind of the ministries and you mentioned the education systems. And what does the classroom, are we teaching? I know there's civics, but are we teaching governance and political process? And I am asking you, it's not just a rhetorical question, because I hear the youth councils and I think that's spectacular, but they're in school 5 days a week, 10 months out of the year. I'm wondering what are we doing in that space? And is that a space for us to be advocating for?
Oh, most definitely. And I have to applaud the Broward County School Board for always creating that space. They always show up. I think teachers do a very good job here of creating, I think back to debate, right? Even debate club here. That's a huge thing here in Broward County. And creating that space for youth to develop those skills and those practices to hold a conversation, to understand how to get a bill passed. And even at the elementary level, that program is here. And I think back to when I was in high school, I was on my high school debate team. And that was normal. Like, I enjoyed that experience. And so when my son got an opportunity to do it here in elementary school, it was really good, because then I can see him researching how to get a bill passed. I see him looking up bills. And I want to make sure that young girls have the same opportunity. And looking at his debate team, his teacher was intentional in making sure girls were represented on her team. And I have to applaud Broward County Schools again for investing so much in the debate program, because that has made a difference. Even during the pandemic, I was able to look in on the debate competition that they still had going on in a virtual space. And the youth were actually excited, and they were debating, they were talking about bills, about things that were important to them, how to keep themselves safe in school. Should homework be required during COVID? I mean, it was just amazing just to see the youth actually debating and moving a bill through Congress. And I have to applaud school systems for doing that.
Wow, that is such good information, and it's so good to hear that these things are happening and that there is that outward perspective in terms of setting up youth councils and things of that nature. And I'm just going to ask the other panelists, Rishma, Dr. Aleah, Maggie, are there any other structures or activities or programs that you can think of, and maybe you've been wanting to design, that you think should be discussed here, but also looking at either being created or being maximized? Anybody? Rishma?
Not wanting to create, but definitely wanting to be a part of, not just for the youth, but it would be great if we had women councils that you talk about, women of your age. We want to make sure that we have a place that we can go to have our voices heard, even if we're not running for politics, we're not running for a position, but we want to make sure that we have our voices heard. It would be great to have maybe on the municipal level, not the county level, but maybe even the city level, sort of like women in governance, community groups that we can join and support each other. That would be fantastic. I don't know of any, maybe you guys know. That's not really, my space that I'm in, but I would love to join something like that. And I haven't seen a lot of them around.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that's a great idea. And I'll just share that there is a National Commission on the Status of Women, and they often deal with a lot of the political issues, and have made over years. Broward County has a very strong one. So yes, salute to, I have been I'm a past chair of the Broward County Commission on the Status of Women. And we've spent a lot of time, and they still do, in terms of working and training women who are interested in becoming elected. So that's a good place to start. And it's a national commission. And so there may be one in your county or cities. In some areas that are very fortunate, they have them on a little bit more of a localized level. In Broward, it operates out of our county commission. And for that, we are thankful. I do know that there is one in Dade County as well. Dr. Aleah, you wanted to weigh in.
Said it all, right? And it's not just about teaching civics and governance, it's about doing civics, so just a discussion about the debates that occurred during the time of COVID. It's about doing, as opposed to just sitting in a classroom and memorizing facts about how many representatives there are in the in Congress. So I think that is definitely important. And, I'm not sure if there are any New Yorkers here, right? I know New York, the YWCA offers leadership programs to, young women and gender non-conforming youth. And there's also an organization called Young People For. And I interned for them like many, many years ago when I was in college. And they provide, that organization, provides social justice leadership training to young people, and not just for for those young people who wants to run for political office, be it local government or Congress, for those persons who want to run for student government, at their college. So there are these organizations that are providing this such necessary training for our young people, and particularly young women.
I agree. Definite representation in technology, science, and medicine. I will tell you that our time is running down, but I want to say a special shout out to, I'm so sorry, Laura Phillips. Laura, thank you for your donation. And for those of you who are trying to donate, please use our GoFundMe. All you have to do is go to GoFundMe and Island Space, and you will find us there. Please. We thank you, Laura, for your support. You're helping to keep the lights on. As we wind down, it would be remiss of me before I ask my last question, and I would like to say thank you to our partners and our sponsors. as I've shared with you, we are here at the Westfield Broward Mall, and they are a key sponsor. We could not do this without them. We thank Grace Foods, Florida Power and Lights, the Consulate of Haiti, the Community Foundation of Broward, and our many, many volunteers. And I would like to say a special shout out to my co-board members here at Island Space. It is always an honor and a privilege to work alongside you, to learn from you as we put these productions together and as we prepare for June 6th, Magic at the Museum right here. So Lloyd Stanberry, Larry Mullings, Sharice Morgan Joseph, Carl Russell, Tamara Filippo, Sharon McClendon, we thank you for your service. And certainly we want to thank our Director of Operations, Marjorie Stanbury. And a very special thank you and shout out to our board president, sexy man who's helping us out in the chat. I'm not harassing him. That's what he goes by. David Muir. Thank you, David, who's also a co-founder of Island Space. And a big, huge, humongous, enough and plenty, big up to Khalib Thompson, who is our executive director, but also our producer, doing all of the tech to make us look good and bring in the B-roll and things of that nature. And she's doing it fantastically. And we thank you, Khalib. Khalib is definitely our leader and our strength and our backbone as well. Thank you. And so, as we wind down this great conversation and dialogue with Dr. Keisha Gray, Maggie Pelleya, Rishma Eckarts, and Dr. Elia Ranjitsingh, we are running out of time, but I'm going to ask each of you in 1 minute or less, just tell us, what do you want this new political tapestry to look like from your lens? Dr. Keisha Gray, I'm going to go Keisha, then Maggie, Aleah, then Rishma.
So for me, I want it to look like a place where it's normalized for women to run and win office seats. I want to see the Stacey Abrahams of our country actually run and win successful campaigns. I want to see Val, who ran in the city of Miramar, win her next run for her campaign. I want to see it normalized that women can run successful campaigns and win office seats. And not just any woman, but in particularly Black women, women of color. Because if we are in spaces like being elected officials, I believe our children and our families will thrive in our communities.
100. And Maggie. Oh, I think we're having a little, I think we may have lost Maggie, unfortunately. Okay, until she gets back in, I'm going to ask Dr. Aleah to jump in. What do you want it to look like, Dr. Aleah?
Similar to Dr. Gray, I want women to take up space in all the spaces and it not be, the first time a woman did X, Y, and Z. Women like Kamala Harris, who, I must say, we describe her as a West Indian, this evening, but I understand her as a Dougala. She is of, Afro-Jamaican descent and, Indian descent and, many Caribbean spaces like Trinidad and Guyana, Suriname. That mixture is known as Dougala. I myself am a Dougala. So, I see her. I see myself in her. And I want that, like Dr. Gray says, to be normalized. I want, my daughter to understand, that a woman's place is in the White House. A woman's place is in the Parliament. Right? A woman's place, is in, the National Assembly. That's what I want it to look like. I want it for myself and for my daughter.
Thank you. And what I like to say is a woman's place is where she says it is. Okay. And so Rishma.
Right. A woman's place is wherever she wants it to be. That's what I usually say as well. The political landscape that I would love to see is reflective of our communities. So not that there is a certain type of woman in politics, but they are reflective of how we are within our society. And also, very importantly, I want our political landscape to show that issues that women face are not just West Indian issues, Black issues, Hispanic issues, but there are issues that everyone faces as well. So I don't want it to be so pigeonholed that it becomes very it's separatist. I would like for people to recognize that women's issues are general issues. We're focusing on the Caribbean and minorities because that is what our panel is about. But in the bigger scope of a political landscape, we're all facing the same issues. So women's issues generally being at the forefront.
Absolutely. Is Maggie coming back in? Yay! Right on time, Maggie. What do you want that landscape to look like?
Yay! I want. Am I back or not?
We're hearing you. Mm-hmm.
I want to have young. Okay. I would like to see young women get involved, get engaged at the high school level.
I am so sorry, viewers. It looks like Maggie's having a little bit of technical difficulties, but from what I'm hearing, it sounds like she wants young women to be able to start becoming involved in the process, even in high school. And I see everybody's head nodding, and so we can certainly agree. Well, for those of you who are tuned in on Facebook, on YouTube, on Jamaicans.com, we thank you for taking the time out of your Wednesday evening and celebrating and closing Women's History Month 2021 with us right here at Island Space Caribbean Museum. Now, remember, we are planning monthly panels as well as programs for educational purposes, for entertainment purposes. So please join, become a member of Island Space. And all you have to do is go to islandspacefl.org and see the membership information. Join now, because with your membership, you then are comped into some of these events. And I'm particularly excited about next month's panel. It is going to be Cannabis Culture, the History of Herb. And for those of you who understand cannabis culture or who are advocates of cannabis culture, what do you know? It will be on 4/20, right? The National, International, Global Cannabis Day. And I am very excited to share with you that I will be the host of that one as well. So we look forward to seeing you on 4/20. But even before that, when you go ahead and become a member, and certainly save the date for Magic at the Museum on June 6th. And with no further ado and all of my gratitude, I thank you, panelists, for all of your insight and your preparation for tonight. It has been an honor sitting at your feet. And on that note, I will say to you all good night, but don't forget to visit Island Space, a place where Caribbean cultures unite.
Join us and let's make history together.
Thank you.
Magic at the Museum, the Island Space Global Launch and Fundraiser, goes live on Sunday, June 6th at 6 p.m. It's a celebration of Caribbean history, culture, and entertainment with a 2021 twist. Learn more at islandspacefl.org/magic and donate today.